Welcome, everyone, to Flyover Footy. I got a really special guest today. He's taken time out of a very busy schedule. Tom Bogert's here from MLS proper. Tom, how's it going, man?
It's going good. Thank you for having me. It's always busy. It's been a sprint. It's funny trying to think about a little bit of not downtime or whatever, but like maybe not having crazy days between MLS Cup and like the World Cup. And then I was like, all right, cool. This week might be a little slow. And then it's like, oh yeah, expansion draft, all this other crap. So it's a grind and you love it.
Yeah, I mean, especially for St. Louis folks, we're not used to this kind of a grind. It's like we got 3 drafts coming up in the next couple of weeks. It's crazy.
And you get to be the belle of the ball. That's the best part about expansion.
It's
this
true.
little month where it's everybody's focused on you. It's all fun. You guys are controlling everything.
It's funny you said that. I bought this giant gold ball gown that I'm going to wear to the expansion draft. I'm going to put my hair up and, try to find a beast that will marry me,
Sounds delightful.
Great. Let's get started, man. Let's go through it. You wrote a great article today. It's exactly what I was hoping to see. Someone who knows the league that can kind of give some ideas, a little cheat sheet on perhaps the kind of players that St. Louis might be looking for. Let's go through it. And the very first thing is exactly the first thing that I've been worried about. I'm extremely worried about us having like one central midfielder. And the first thing you throw out in this article is 2 veteran MLS, like really quality USMNT central midfielders. They are aging, of course, but they're quality guys.
Yeah, I would in this group, and I might be the biggest Dax McCarty fan around the league. In this group of 2 players, like I would take Alejandro Bedoya ahead of Dax. Like both, you have to worry about age concerns. It's kind of like they both turned 36 in April. They're both the absolute top quality guys. You cannot hear a bad word about either one of these guys. Dax has been through the expansion process with Nashville. He's a big reason of what they are today, both like on the field, particularly his first 2 years with the club. He was awesome. But the culture that he sets, the leadership, all of that is like invaluable. Alejandro Bedoya, he didn't join an expansion team, but Philadelphia might as well have been an expansion team when he joined. He's been at the heart of every single good thing that they've done over the last half decade. And oh, by the way, on the field this year, it was might have been his best year ever. So I think both players have a lot left in the tank. Bedoya, I'm less worried about than McCarty because McCarty's played like 2,000 minutes or less each of the last 2 years. He hasn't done that since 2010. So it seems like he's slowing down a little bit. Bedoya had the injury concerns in the playoffs, but for me, it's I don't know if Philly just ran out of spots to protect guys or they were like, you know what? St. Louis aren't going to take Bedoya or Bedoya is going to refuse to go. So I don't know what the thought process is there, but like I can't think of a better kind of captain first, like culture leadership guy, somebody who's going to be starting at 30 games or however many he's fit for in this expansion season than somebody like Alejandro Bedoya.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see it. A friend of mine who's a Philly guy was like, he's just going to retire this year. So maybe that's another.
I like wrote in the story. I was like, this is like particularly both of these guys, obviously, but I was honing in on Bedoya that this is like he's earned it throughout his career that like, and you need to protect yourselves. Where like this needs to be a conversation and a joint decision because if Bedoya says like, F you, I'm refusing to show up or I'll just retire. Then like your hands are tied and like maybe you get 100,000, 200,000 allocation money from Philly and that's not worth it. That's not the value of these picks. You get more or just select a different player that wants to come. So yeah, these are all fluid. These are conversations that need to be happening if they were to go to the route of taking Bedoya.
Yeah, we're going to touch on that especially kind of thing at the end there. Tyler Miller is next on your list as a USL guy. We know Tyler Miller and I love that guy. There's a lot of good goalkeepers in this possible draft. So I like that shout though. What do you think about Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with him is that, like, I was talking to people after I wrote this story. Is that I got the list, like, an hour before it went out, and I was trying real hard to, like, write as quickly as I could, digest it as quick as I could. I still really like Tyler Miller. And, like, I think that there would be a market if St. Louis said, hey, who needs a goalie? Yeah, 300,000, whatever it is, 400,000, we'll select Tyler Miller and trade him to you. But obviously, St. Louis have Roman Berkey. They don't need a goalkeeper. Another one, like Tyler Miller's like cap hit, I think is like 400,000. It's not expensive whatsoever, but like Stephen Cleveland is a guy who's like much more cap friendly. He might be somebody that teams want to trade for. So if they go the goalie route, again, obviously this team has Roman Berkey. they're not like, I mean, they could select a backup goalkeeper here, but that wouldn't be a great use, I think, of the 5 picks. So Tyler Miller, Stephen Cleveland is another one kind of in that category.
Yeah, Evan Laurel was like another USL friendly goalkeeper that I thought was a good option. One of my favorites, we won't go through every one of these. I'm going to pick and choose, but Alex Mule is like one of my favorites on this list. I think he played some right wing back, if I'm not mistaken, which is a hole in our roster as well. So that was a cool one.
Yeah, I thought that, like, I thought he was fine as a wing back this year. I thought he was going to be really, really good. Because, like, again, like, what his fit for this group, I think would be really good. I think his fit in Nashville has been really good. And so I think you know what you're going to get with this kind of guy. And he's, again, these are the dudes that you need as, like, control foundation guys in an expansion year. You don't have to worry about, he's going to set the club positively. Look, he's not going to get 15 goals and 8 assists. He's just not that guy. But he's still, a really solid MLS player. And he's somebody that, again, when I was writing this, I was like, he'd probably be near the top of my list, like, depending on salary contract. Like, we're going to talk about Andre Shinyashiki, I'm sure, later. I don't know exactly where Shinyashiki's new contract lines up with Wheels. But, like, again, these are, like, this is just a dude that, like, high floor. You just don't have to worry about it. Solid player. Bradley Cornell obviously knows him from his Red Bull days. He fits the system. You know exactly what you're going to get. I think that this one's kind of a no-brainer to me, unless you think that you could trade for him from Nashville later and like later in the offseason, which I think that might be getting too cute. But like, again, I think that this would make a lot of sense.
I agree. Speaking of former Red Bull products, Tim Parker was a great shout. There's a few center backs in here, but Tim Parker is the most like obvious one as far as like name recognition.
Too expensive. His cap hit this year was $1 million.
Oh yeah,
and that's like 30% more than Aaron Long and than like Alex Cowens. Like, Alex Cowens is like the best center back, one of the best center backs in the league. Like Jacob Glesnes, Jack Elliott's like $500,000. Like Tim Parker, like it's okay to like overpay or whatever. I get it, but like Tim Parker's been so far beyond. Like I still think he's a fine player. Fit in Houston's been really bad. It hasn't gone great. Like if there's a way to rework his deal, like he probably would have been my top pick. Or like so that's kind of why that like at the end of like my article, like he wouldn't be one of the 5 I picked just because of that. But like I wouldn't hate it if they did. I'd be like, all right, I get it. That makes sense. I can see it.
Yeah, and I did see a thing that like we can renegotiate the contracts, and it's a negotiation. It's not like you do this or nothing. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that was an interesting thing that someone pointed out today. Andre Shinyashiki, that's another of my favorites. We definitely need a backup, or someone who can help out in the striker role or attack role. He seems to be one of the better ones. There's a few out there though.
Yeah, what I like a lot about him too is that like he can play either wing or center forward, and like that's super valuable. And like who knows if Bradley Card, again, like the tactics are going to be the same in terms of the identity, but like the formations can change. So if you have a guy who could fill a bunch of different roles, he's really dynamic in terms of his pace and his directness. Like Charlotte didn't play high pressing, Colorado didn't play high pressing, but he's a player I think that would fit this really well. So he's somebody that would make sense. I know that when Charlotte traded for him in the spring, like there was a handful of other teams who were making offers or really trying. So he's somebody that, again, like I think he might get taken depending on what teams think of his new contract. But like, I think if he gets taken, like there's a chance that there's a trade. Like he's definitely a sought after player. He was one that I was surprised that was unprotected. And that's because like Charlotte don't have any homegrown. So they didn't have anybody automatically protected. They had to use their 12 protection on like 25 eligible guys. So it's like somebody had to be odd man out. And again, I think that he's one of the most likely to get taken. Yeah, and
let's just start with the strikers, and we'll work our way back in case you want to mention some other guys. Like there was it sounds like a false rumor about Ake Loba coming to St. Louis. Joe Keeney's on the list. Any other like backup or strikers if that like a veteran striker that we could use regularly that we could look at?
I honestly really like the idea of taking Patrick Klimala. I know that's not very sexy because he hasn't been good for the Red Bulls. He got benched for a while, and like their center forward situation is really bad. But like this is a move. He was bought for $4 million like 2 years ago, and a year before that he was bought for $4 million by Celtic. Like this is a kid with pedigree. I kind of wrote about it as like if I'm Lutz, like I'm calling all my Bundesliga contacts and being like he's available for $2.5 million. Like could you get a bid? Or like being less cynical, I think that you roll the dice on somebody who had talent, who had pedigree. You could fit him into your budget because you're probably not adding another DP. Like you get this like asset the way that Philly got like Julian Carranza. You say, hey, not new system for him, but new environment, everything. Hey, maybe we can be the team that unlocks is potential. So that's one that I would like. I understand why you wouldn't use an expansion slot on him. Too much risk at like his contract. But like if I was to take kind of one big swing kind of in the expansion draft, I think that'd be him.
I like that. If we took one big swing, he would be the guy to go to because it's possible. It is possible.
And like looking back in previous years, teams like it varies, but like Miami and Nashville, for instance, like Nashville's biggest swing was like trading for Joe Willis. Like a lot of teams treat this as we're not going to take on any contracts above 200,000 or something. Yeah. And again, that's a viable strategy. That's why even like I was nitpicking my own list of like, all right, well, these are good players, but are St. Louis really going to put their like salary resources into this, or is it going to be we're going to try to grab a bunch of guys who are like below like whatever 400,000, 300, whatever it is, and try to like see if we can get like depth guys rather than hey, Klimala could be an above average starter for us, right? So like I'm curious to see how it's going to play out, but I think the team have plenty of like space to kind of work in. If they really like one of these players, they could go for it.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that in a minute here too as well. I think the biggest hole, I keep harping on it, I'm sure my guys in the DMs are like so sick of it, but one central midfielder at this point. And I mean, you got to get at least two more, I would say, by the end of the off season, in my opinion. Are there guys like veteran MLS guys that they could pick up and keep in this draft that you can see?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about Bedoya, like Will Trapp is another guy, but again, he's pretty expensive. Like I'm sure that there are, like I don't have obviously the full list ahead of me, and even if I did, that's too many names to just be kind of diving through. But like I do think that there are plenty of like center mids that I wasn't thinking of because I was looking at like guys who could start or guys who could make an impact. Like I'm certain that there's plenty of like 25-year-olds that like weren't starters that aren't like that hey, you're gonna be our number 3 central midfielder, and like it's going to be like a safe pick like that I like, and I like kind of like where your head's at. Like that's what teams have used the expansion draft for. Like they haven't swung for like the Bedoya Klimala types. They've gone for more of like that type.
And lastly in this kind of questioning area, center back, you covered goalkeeper plenty, I think, but center back we could use another veteran guy. We only talked about one. Are there any other guys coming to mind that maybe we'd want to pick up? Center back or even fullback?
Yeah, I mean, fullback was something I was thinking of too, because like there's only one fullback on the roster, but like I didn't really love all the options here. Like I think Monterita is a good player, but he's pretty expensive, and I don't know if that's something that they really want to do. Like at center back, I like Jackson Reagan. He's somebody who could be on the supplemental roster, which means that he's not only is he on the league minimum, but he doesn't even count against the cap. That would be pretty useful. But again, I don't know exactly how he'd fit into this system. John Bell in New England is a guy who I think would make sense. There's a couple other of like those cheaper options than say a Tim Parker or something like that's. I could see that, but again, like there's Nils, there's Hibbert, there's Yarrow. Like those are like Hibbert and Yarrow are kind of the rotation or backup center back, the ones who aren't going to be very expensive. So like they need like so Aaron Long is available in the expansion draft, but that doesn't mean anything. He's a free agent. Like there's no point to taking a free agent in the expansion draft. I'm surprised that there hasn't been more chatter about St. Louis and Aaron Long, given Bradley Carnell, given the system and like free agent and expansion teams always take, or the good ones at least, always take a big swing at center back, and that kind of dictates how their season goes. Like Charlotte didn't really do that. Nashville did. LAFC did. Like Austin kind of did with Beasley, but Atlanta did. Like you look at the successful ones, it's whether it's usually it's a trade or usually it's been a trade. And that's kind of where I would see them going for like their starting center back or something rather than say in the expansion.
Okay, interesting. So looking for a free agent or a trade, interesting. Okay, that's good to think about. And that is what I want to ask you about. Since you mentioned it, let's stick with it. How does salary, we've been kind of touching on free agency. You would know better than us. We're constantly talking about, is this person an international player or does he have a green card? It's so hard. Like, I don't think there's a way to know. Yeah, but obviously we have 3 international slots everyone's been talking about today so far. So yeah, can you talk about like how salary, free agency, green cards, how that impacts this draft coming up?
That's the thing. That's why like for the players who I think are most valuable and available are guys who are domestic players, because again, I think the team had before these trades had pretty much filled up their international slots. But again, that doesn't stop you from signing an international player, because there are always international spots to trade for. And again, expansion teams have plenty of allocation money. It's never a roadblock, but it's something to consider. Like they're not there's not going to be 4 international players selected unless they're all being traded here in the expansion draft. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. They're in a good spot. Just talking with Lutz, like they wanted to do most of their international signings prior to now and have this period just focusing on the domestic market. And the domestic market doesn't necessarily mean in like an American player or Canadian player. This there could like Moderita is somebody who's been in the league a while. That's a domestic player. Mm-hmm. Like so, like these are kind of like the mechanisms that go into it. The ways that it kind of changes the equation. So yeah, it's something to keep an eye on, and that's why I think myself and others who have kind of been around for a little while is that you hone in mostly on domestic players in the expansion draft, and like the super draft is another one too. There are a lot of like Jeff Fall in DC United. His talent was absolutely like probably top 15. He fell to the second round because teams just don't draft international players in the super draft because the track record isn't great unless that you're some like unicorn that's found his way into college soccer for a year from an international player. So again, these are all things to think of, and that kind of changes the value and changes the math because if you have 11 international roster spots, you're not going to use it on a backup goalie or backup left back. You know what I mean? Like they're all going to be high leverage spots, which is unfortunate for people who are, probably would be a solid MLS player, but like a rotation center mid, it's not very valuable to use an international slot. So it's like, it is interesting to me the way that teams kind of balance this. Like if you have like a domestic core, then you can get away with using international slots lower down the roster because you have that domestic core. Like look at Nashville. They've the past 2 years, immediately when the off season starts, they trade for international slots because even some of their international players like Anibal Godoy has a green card. Like I'm sure Hani Mukhtar have one soon. I don't know how soon, maybe this year, next year. Some teams are just better at working at it. This arcane government stuff, it's weird, but yeah, these are all things that kind of go into roster, but it's what makes MLS MLS.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the fun for sure. But it does make it hard for guys like me to kind of track like who is a domestic or not. But it is what it is.
It makes me valuable.
Very, very good point. I like your thinking. But yeah, speaking of you being valuable, you know a lot more than me, and so I don't know what you can say, but we're hearing a lot of guys being like, well, it's mostly focusing on domestic at this point. When we saw these international slots being bought, we thought, oh man, young DP is still available. We only have 2 designated players. Like maybe some more internationals are coming from around the world, which seems to be Lutz's, strong point. We'll see, maybe, but it seems to be what he's good at. So I didn't know if you're able to comment on the possibility of that in the near future.
No, or if they're saving them. I'm glad that you brought that up too. Again, like these, and I try to be careful too with my phrasing and all of this. Like nothing is like hard and fast. Like if a deal came up that they were unexpected, and it was an international player, if it was another center forward, another attacking midfielder, if the player was right, like they'd do it. Like, but like just generally their planning was by the summer was to have players from international markets. But again, in the winter, things change. Like the Galaxy kind of come to mind quickly. Like Dejan Joveljic, that wasn't a planned signing. It was like they didn't know they were going to be in that market or he was going to be available. And then it was a price point, and then he was interested in coming, and then you go down the line. Same thing with Ricky Puig. Like they wanted to add an attacking midfielder, but it was like, yeah, maybe he's available. And like, wait a minute. Like, oh, he's interested? Okay, well, we only have $1.5 million at 1.5 million. That probably won't. Oh, like that might do it. Like you're good with a free transfer because of how bad your your cap situation is, Barcelona. Like if that happens, like they'll move. Like again, you have plans, and then you can divert from plans if the right option comes up. So again, like they've said that they don't really see themselves adding any more DPs, but like if somebody they like is unexpectedly available, they would pull the trigger.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love that. And that leads right into the next thing. Like you were mentioning about Mule or Klimala, like, Lutz, you mentioned in your article, Lutz has contacts in Europe. Some of these guys are like German. I forgot who it was, the German speaking free agent, but he could sell one of these people. This draft could be the best thing that's ever happened to him. He gets this player for free and then he just sells him for money. So like, that's a really interesting part of your article that I hadn't really considered.
Yeah. And like, again, like for like the Red Bulls, apparently they were trying to hold out to like get their $4 million back, which makes sense. You sunk cost fallacy, all that. St. Louis, it's bonus money. They sold him for $1.5 million. Like it's not like they paid $4 million for him, right? So like I don't know, like, but then it comes down to, all right, is it more valuable to have this, or is it more valuable to like use one of these slots for a player? But like, I don't know. I just think that all these things are interesting. I was laughing that the year the Austin did it, like. They selected Joe Corona despite him not having a contract. They just did really bad with their expansion draft. Selected Joe Corona without him having a contract, just banking on the fact they get the contract done. Contract didn't get done. He's eligible for the re-entry draft, another arcane MLS thing. And then they were like, yeah, like nobody's going to take you. And then Houston just picked him because they're like, screw you, like you could give us money for him. Like, so these are just things that, like, again, like these are like way too inside MLS. People from outside of the league won't understand, but it's fun. It's stupid. It's silly, but it keeps it entertaining this time of year.
Well, you're speaking to the target market for that kind of a story. That's a good one. We love our listeners in that way. Cool, man. Anything else? And do you want to talk about? We only got a few more minutes, maybe, but like, you want to talk about what St. Louis has done? Like, your opinion of the roster build so far, the good and the bad. A lot of people are critical of this Berkey move, so that might be something interesting that you might be able to talk about. But the only thing I'll add before I just set you free on whatever you want to talk about is, that we've gotten a lot of quality players on a free from Europe, which in Europe is a very, good value. How does that translate to MLS? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing. This kind of reminds, they seem more like Charlotte. They had more. What I really liked is that they had 7 signings by like July 31st or whatever it was. Like, yeah. I don't know why more teams didn't do that. Like, I really like that. I think that that's smart. And they had them in market. Like, you could talk about whether it's more valuable for them to stay like playing at a higher level. Like, Klaus played a couple of MLS Next Pro games and he ruined the league. It was a joke. Like, he had like 7 goal contributions, 250 minutes. I'm sure that wasn't useful for him, but being in the market was useful for him. Seeing a little bit of the travel, like being air quote home at his new home, like that. That's one thing I really liked. But in like large takeaways, I don't feel comfortable like making them. Like, when people were shitting on Charlotte last year, I was like, dude, like, maybe you don't agree with individual moves, but like, you're looking at it like too direct. Like, you won't see the full puzzle for another few months. Like, so again, there are things that I'm worried about. Like, what if like they need a 6, they need a center back, but yeah, they have 12 players under contract. Like, of course they need to make more signings. With Roman Berkey, again, like, generally speaking, going domestic and going cheaper at goalkeeper is usually more valuable. But like, I'm not gonna say that that's a bad signing yet. Like, we haven't seen him play. Like, what if he's really, really great? Like, he's probably a little bit more expensive than they would have liked, but you could, if they don't sign another DP, they could just put him on a DP spot. That saves allocation money. Like, if you weren't going to use that slot anyway, why not? Like, I don't know. Like, again, generally, yeah, like, I would have went cheaper at goalkeeper, but I'm not going to sit here without Roman Berkey putting on gloves for a real game for St. Louis and being like, what an awful signing. That was so stupid. Like, yeah, sometimes good players cost money. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, it is weird to think about that expensive signing being such a discount on what he is in the world. It's a
and that too.
And yeah, I was one of the people kind of critiquing Charlotte for so many international slots last year. I wasn't crazy about it, but I did say it, and now look at us. I mean, we're outdoing them, so eating my words for sure. Any last thoughts before we go, Tom?
No, I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do and seeing, like, one thing that I didn't love from Charlotte. They didn't take kind of a big swing on a trade. They tried. They thought they had Paul Arriola. They asked around about some other like all-star level players, but like the prices never lined up. I do hope that St. Louis take a big swing again, whether that's one of the biggest free agents like Long or Callens or Johnson or whoever you want to say, or it's like a 1.5 million-ish trade, because I think we've seen, as long as you get the player right, like Kellen Acosta, Mark Anthony Kaye, Walker Zimmerman the first time. Like, if you get the player right, it's so worth it. And it's just a way to kind of set your club up for success moving forward. And like, that's one thing I would be curious to see if they're able to, like, again, I know that they're scouting, I know they have targets, but teams know that they have a lot of allocation money because of expansion. So maybe they're not ever going to get a fair price, but I do hope to see something like that if they do get the right target as center back, number 6, number 8. Like, that could be so useful for an expansion team.
Awesome, man. I love it so much. I can't thank you enough for joining us today. Guys, this is just the beginning of what you're going to be hearing from Tom Bogert. So make sure you're following him on Twitter. He's got all the good news, the bird dog, as they say on Extra Time. So thanks again, man. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're busy.
Cheers, man. I appreciate you having me.